Welcome to Home Farm on a somewhat noisy Sunday morning with all the sheep and lambs clearly all trying to talk at the same time. Today we're going to be focusing on stinging nettles. To this point we have found stinging nettles to be a bit of an issue with regards to our property, but after some recent reading I have done a complete U-turn on these guys. So what we're going to be doing today, for the very first time that we're going to be doing this anyway, is we are going to use stinging nettles for three different things. The first thing that we're going to do is forage for nettles to make nettle soup that will be consumed by ourselves. The second thing we're going to make is nettle tea. This basically acts like a fertilizer for plants. And the last thing that we're going to do is utilize the nettles for our compost heap as a source of green and nitrogen to get our compost heap activated. Over the course of the last 2 years we've done a lot of maintenance work around our garden, and during that time, as we've tried to pull things out or plant things, you don't see a nettle and it stings you. It's not very comfortable, it's not unbearable, but it certainly is something that you want to avoid, especially while we are doing an exercise like this. So I've put on some really heavy duty gloves to ensure that I don't get stung, because I'm going to be doing quite a lot of this, so I'd rather avoid that if I can. So we're going to start off by harvesting some nettles for our nettle soup. So I've got a bowl which I'll show you shortly. We're going to gather 400 grams of stinging nettles for our soup. So I'm going to start chopping and I'll show you as an indication how much 400 grams actually is. April is a very good time to be harvesting nettles to make things like nettle soup, purely because they aren't flowering, and from what I've read, by all accounts, the actual leaves have a really good flavor to them still. So I have no idea what it tastes like. People have said it's spinach, but we will cover that a little bit later. So what I'm going to do is we're not going to be cutting this to damage the roots in any way. We're literally just going to be chopping off the top, and we'll be gathering that and putting it in a bowl, and we'll see how many leaves comprise 400 grams. In order to give you an idea of quantity, one bowl, such as this one, just a standard weighing bowl, it's not huge, it's a medium-sized bowl really, takes about 200 grams. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this bowl up to the house, empty it, and fill up another bowl with that. As you can see, we've just chopped the tops of the nettles. We want to keep all of the soft bits. We don't want to get too many stalky bits, because it's not going to be very easy to separate that without getting stung. So you want to just get the tender leaves up at the top. So by cutting it the way that we did, we will be encouraging new growth, which, as it actually turns out, is actually a good thing, because it's just going to give us a source of nettles to make nettle tea, and to also add the nettles to our compost heap as the season progresses. We have successfully harvested our 400 grams of nettles. They are both up in the kitchen, and we'll do that as the last portion of this video in terms of how we prepare and make the nettle soup. It's the first time that we've ever made that, but I love making soup, so it'll be quite a nice challenge to get that one on the go. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to make the nettle tea, and we're going to gather some nettles for our compost. In our garden, the fortunate thing for us is that we've got quite a nice gathering of nettles near the pond. So this will be our harvest area. We're going to keep the rest of the nettles around the house as they grow, just to let other insects and things that require them to utilize them as their home. But this small little portion that we have here should be ample for us to create nettle soup if we like it, and certainly it'll be enough for us to add to our compost heap, because you don't need huge amounts of green nitrogen in the heap that we're going to be making, and it'll certainly be enough for us to make compost tea. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to fill the first bucket with about 1/3 of its capacity with nettles. That'll be used for the nettle tea, and the other one we're going to pretty much fill and chop up, which I will show you, and that'll get added to our compost heap. So that's what we're going to do next. We're going to get chopping just as we did with the other one. There's a bunch of nettles on that side, and here, which should be more than enough for what we want to do. So that's great. I've gathered 2 buckets of stinging nettles, one that is largely full, the other one that's about a third full. What we're going to do now is I'm going to take the shears and I'm just going to chop them up so that they are a little bit small and manageable. The full size bucket is going to go on a compost heap, and the one that's a third full we're going to chop up and make some nettle tea. Very simply, I will just get in here and just cut that up so that it gets processed into far more smaller manageable bits. So I brought my bucket with the chopped up stinging nettles to our compost heap. Our compost heap, as we can see, is largely brown. There are some vegetable offcuts such as leeks and other green brassicas. What we're going to do now is I'm just going to layer some of this underneath the brown foliage that we can see. The reason we do this is because nettles are quite rich in nitrogen, as are grass clippings, but I prefer to use our grass clippings to put around trees that act both as mulch and that actually also add a little bit of nitrogen and nutrition back into the soil. So I'm just going to fold back portions of this so we can get in underneath, and I'm just going to put small amounts of the nettles underneath to get the whole stack going. I've never done this before, so what I'm trying to do is just introduce the nettles at a far more manageable rate and actually see what they end up doing, so that I will know how many more I can add in the future. What I'll probably do later this afternoon is go and rake some of those up and add them as another layer on top of all of this to really get this heap going. So I have now taken our 14-litre bucket, which was a third filled with nettles, and I have filled it to about 12 litres with water, and I will now leave this for about 10 days to fully mature, and hopefully by the end of this I'm going to have a tea that has got reasonable amounts of nitrogen, iron and magnesium in it that I can then use as a fertilizer. All that remains for me to do is to just get a stick, give that a good stir so that everything is thoroughly integrated in with the water, and I'm just going to take it around the corner by the compost heap in the shade and leave it there for 10 days to mature. As an update on my nettle tea, what I forgot to mention at the outset was that we do stir it every day just to make sure that everything keeps moving around. And the other very notable point is that it really does start to smell. So this nettle tea is now 6 days old and it's already beginning to release quite a strong odor, and I think that it's going to get stronger yet. So it's a good thing that we have set it aside quite some distance from the house. It is near the compost heap anyway. Like I said, the house is quite some distance away. So that is the update. It is beginning to really draw now, and it's beginning to, I think, ferment a little bit too, which is part of the process. The smell is, like I said, already beginning to get quite strong. I would imagine that if we leave it for another week, it's going to get stronger still. I did say 10 days at the outset of this video. When I've gone online and read, you can actually leave it for weeks and weeks to go. I am actually going to extract a little bit of this over the course of the next maybe 4 or 5 days as a fertilizer to strengthen our cherry tree, because it is fighting a bacterial fungus. I know that this mixture isn't designed to cure cherry trees or fruit trees from fungus infections, but due to its very strong antiviral properties, it is a preventative measure. So hopefully the tree can fend off the bacteria that it's currently fighting, and this will just give its immune system a bit of a shot, almost like we take vitamins. I'm hoping that it's going to have a similar impact. So that's the update on our nettle tea. As I said, I have left ours in the shade. It's not evaporated at all during that time. I might actually put a lid on because we're expecting a couple of really hot days now, just to make sure that we're not losing anything to the atmosphere. Now it's time to make our nettle soup. These are the nettles that we picked earlier this morning. I've got to say they've got a nice green fresh smell to them, so I'm intrigued to see what they taste like. In addition to that, we need our basic mirepoix ingredients, which are carrots, onions and celery. I'm also going to add some garlic to ours right at the end. A lot of the recipes that I saw online, people do add potato to theirs. I typically don't add potato to our soups. In this instance, I can understand that the soup is going to come out a bit thin. But then I never add potato to our spinach soup either. I'm going to not do the potato. We'll see whether that's right or wrong. So as a first step, we are going to chop up the carrots, onions and celery, and we are going to put those on a low simmer. Now we're going to put our pan on a medium heat, give it a good glug of oil. We'll be adding the carrots, celery and onion to that, and we'll let them simmer for 5 to 10 minutes just so they soften up a little bit. As this continues to just sweat out a little bit, we're going to leave that and we're going to head over to our sink and we're going to wash the nettles out. Now obviously you've got to be quite careful. You don't have gloves on at this stage, so I do want to give this a rinse. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run it through some cold water. I'm going to fill up the bowl that it's in, and I'm probably going to just take a spoon and I'm just going to work my way through it, and hopefully any dirt or insects or anything else that might be in there is going to wash up to the top. I've got to say that as you do that, the smell becomes sweeter and sweeter, actually becomes quite pleasant, even more pleasant than it was. We have had a couple of leaves that have fallen to the side. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to get those out and I'm going to put this into a colander and just rinse it through the colander. Brilliant, so I've got my super big colander for the job. We're now going to just tip the contents of this into the colander without touching your fingers, hopefully, and getting jolted or knocking the camera. Let's adjust that. I'm going to just get my tongs, pick up the few little bits that have fallen out the sides, and we'll just run some more water through this, washing out whatever might still be in here. So we're giving these a good rinse. I've been using my tongs not to touch anything. So what we now need to do is check on our mirepoix. It's looking really good. That smells absolutely amazing. Now is as good a time as any, as with all soups, to give it a good bit of salt. I use Malden salt because it's really nice. And what I'm now going to do is I'm just going to probably fill that up. Well, not fill it up, but I'm probably going to add about 1.5 to 2 liters of water, possibly a little bit more to that. And that will basically make our vegetable stock. We'll just let that cook for about 10 or 15 minutes to really just pull all the flavors through. And then we will move over to introduce the nettles into the mix. Water added. Now we are going to put the lid on and we are going to let that come to a small boil. Then we will turn it down and let it simmer for about 15 minutes just to create a really lovely vegetable stock. That'll be our base for our nettle soup. Once that's ready, we will go and add the nettles to it and see how they cook and what kind of smell we're going to derive from that. We've had the stock simmering away now for the last 15 to 20 minutes. It smells absolutely divine. I really do love vegetable stock. And now we are at the critical moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and get the nettles that we've cleaned and washed, trying my utmost not to touch any of them. As opposed to just tipping them in, I'm going to just use some tongs to get them in there. And one would hope that, as with all leafy soups like this, once you get them in the pot, it always seems like an incredible amount. But by the time they wilt under the heat, oh, this is barely going to fit. That's might have a few left over. Anyway, there we go, we've jammed those in. So let's just get all of these in here now. We'll get the lid back on and let's see whether the leaves will wilt. So the lid's been on for 5 minutes. It's all beginning to wilt down really nicely. It's beginning to really release the same smell as spinach, which is quite interesting. And in fact, it's wilting pretty much the way spinach does. It just doesn't break down, it remains quite strong. So we'll just flip that around. Obviously it's soaking up a lot of the water, but it smells really, really nice. It's almost like a minty, spinachy type smell. We'll probably give that another couple of minutes just to really wilt down. And then we will take over with the immersion blender. So there we go, the nettles are all cooked. They look really great, really nice aroma coming from them. Now we're going to switch over to the best tool for soups. This is the KitchenAid immersion blender. So we blended the soup. As we can see, it's got very much the same consistency as spinach. It doesn't blend as finely, so it doesn't become a liquid. You can actually see there's little chunky bits, which is actually quite nice. But obviously this is a little bit too thick to have as a soup as it is now. It's more of a stew almost. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just thin this out with some milk, which should be quite interesting. And I suppose we should give it a quick sample just to see what it tastes like. I'm actually a bit intrigued. That is really, really nice. It almost tastes what it actually looks like. It's got tones of greeniness. It very much does have that spinachy type effect without it being spinach, with some subtle tones of mintiness. But not minty.
Let me try this, I'll tell you. Oh, God, look at that. It looks
Yeah, it needs
really
to get thinned
green.
out.
It's so amazing. Is it spicy?
No, not even remotely.
It smells like spinach soup. Tastes like sweet spinach soup. It tastes like, yeah, just like sweet spinach soup.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe it's the carrots, but
I'm not getting much carrot.
it doesn't have as much, like spinach soup's got more of that iron flavour at the end. It doesn't have that. This is a lot more subtle at the end. But it doesn't taste spicy. I can't get any spice off
The one piece of inspiration that I had was to just introduce a little bit of garlic to that. So what I'll do is add that right at the end.
Yeah.
But it is quite nice. I think
I think it needs garlic.
It needs garlic,
And I think,
and obviously it needs to get thinned out with a bit of milk.
I would add a little bit of white pepper to it.
Yeah, white
A little
pepper's
bit of
nice
white
idea.
pepper, I think. But really nice. It tastes like soft spinach soup. But still got flavour.
Yeah, nice.
I mean, I think actually, because you did it with vegetable stock, I think if someone had done it with a chicken stock, just to give it that kind of natural oily kind of, that would make it really, really tasty. But it's really lovely.
Well, we're going to doctor it up a little bit and we'll update you. So we're going to add some single cream, just a touch, because it always does soften these kind of meals a little bit. In goes the milk. We'll give it a good glug just so we can thin it out a little bit so it does start to resemble soup more than it does nettle stew. And we're going to blitz it again. That's much better from a consistency perspective. Much happier with that. Now we're going to add a little bit of ground white pepper, just the pinch. Give it a little bit of heat. And next up, we're going to add the garlic. I like to microplane mine in. I don't crush it, so all I'm going to do is I'm just going to run it on the microplane like this. If it builds up on the back, you just use your finger, and it goes. And we'll do that to all of them. We're going to blitz it again just to incorporate all of our additions. And there we have it. That is our nettle soup. The garlic and the white pepper has definitely given it a bit of zing. Definitely gives it a bit of extra flavor. So super pleased with the way this has turned out. As we can see, it definitely did not need the potato, which is what I thought at the outset. The consistency is absolutely fantastic by adding the milk that we wanted with a little bit of cream, and it's super delicious. Time to dish up and have some right now. So I hope that has given you a couple of insights into some potential uses for stinging nettles. They certainly are going to be a lot more useful than I ever gave them credit for. So we'll keep you posted with regards to how our nettle tea progresses and how effective it has been in our compost heap. Thanks for watching. Give us a thumbs up and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Bye bye. Thanks for watching. You can also follow us on Twitter or check out our website at myhomefarm.co.uk. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the subscribe button below, and if you have any suggestions for any other videos you would like to see, please leave a comment. We hope to see you on our next video.